Have you ever felt like you were trapped in your own home, powerless against a neighbor or an authority figure who seemed to hold all the cards? Well, what if I told you that a simple driveway dispute turned into a battle for justice, and not only did one man reclaim his peace, but he exposed a tyrant in his community? Stick around, because this story isn't just about a driveway. It's about standing up for your rights and showing that no one, no matter how powerful, can take away your freedom without a fight. The sun had barely risen when Lisa and John stepped out onto their front porch to enjoy a quiet cup of coffee, the gentle morning breeze filling their lungs. After years of hard work, they have finally reached the pinnacle of their dream, living in a peaceful suburban neighborhood where the grass was always manicured. The streets were quiet, and the neighbors smiled and waved as they passed. It felt like paradise. John had retired from a successful career in banking, and Lisa had devoted her life to raising their children and managing their home. Now, they were ready to embrace this new chapter in their lives, one filled with relaxation and the enjoyment of their hard-earned success. They couldn't have asked for a better setting. But, as they would soon discover, things weren't as perfect as they seemed. Beneath the polished exterior of their quiet neighborhood lurked a growing issue that would soon turn their idyllic life upside down. It all started one sunny morning when Lisa and John woke up to find something that would soon become all too familiar. Their driveway was blocked. But it wasn't just any ordinary parking violation. It was Karen, the HOA president, with her luxury SUV parked directly in front of their driveway, completely blocking it. The situation, while initially small, was a sign of something much larger brewing beneath the surface. Lisa tried to remain calm as she walked outside and politely asked Karen to move her car. However, Karen's response was far from gracious. "Oh, I'm just parking here for a bit. There have been complaints about your driveway," she said dismissively, her tone icy. "Complaints about my driveway?" Lisa replied, confused. "Yes," Karen continued. "It doesn't comply with HOA standards. So I'm just doing my part to make sure everything stays in order." Lisa tried to explain that there was nothing wrong with the driveway. After all, it was just a normal concrete driveway like any other. But Karen was unmoved, and with that, the battle lines were drawn. Over the next few days, the situation didn't improve. Lisa and John found themselves waking up each morning to find Karen's SUV still parked across their driveway. They tried calling the HOA to report the issue, but every time they did, the response was the same. Karen was just doing her job. The couple felt increasingly isolated. Their neighbors, too scared to stand up to Karen, either ignored the situation or, worse, quietly supported Karen's actions. It felt like no one had the courage to speak out. Even worse, Lisa and John began to receive fines from the HOA for not using their driveway. This felt like a slap in the face. How could they be penalized for something they had no control over? But each time they tried to explain the situation, Karen would find a way to make them feel guilty. Her behavior felt more like a power play, and the couple began to realize that they were up against more than just a petty dispute over parking. They were facing a tyrant who enjoyed having control over others. This feeling of powerlessness is something that many people can relate to, especially when you're dealing with bureaucratic systems that seem to protect those who misuse their authority. Days turned into weeks, and the situation only escalated. The fines kept coming, each one more absurd than the last. Lisa and John received penalties for things as trivial as having too many flowers in their garden or not trimming the hedges just right. They felt like they were walking on eggshells, afraid that the next letter from the HOA would come with new demand or complaint. The couple began to feel like prisoners in their own home, constantly under the watchful eye of Karen and the HOA. It was emotionally draining. They had worked so hard to create a home they could be proud of, only for it to be overshadowed by the oppressive, petty rules that seemed to be designed more control than to help. This is where many people find themselves stuck, feeling overwhelmed by the mounting pressure of external forces, unable to escape or fight back. But sometimes the best solution is not to fight fire with fire, but to outsmart the system entirely. One afternoon, after yet another parking incident and another fine for something as minor as their mailbox being too bold, John had had enough. He could feel the frustration building inside him. For the first time in his life, he felt like he had been pushed too far. It wasn't just the fines. It was a constant stress, the feeling of being disrespected in his own home. Lisa could see the change in him. She knew that something needed to be done. As they sat together, discussing what to do next, Lisa came to a realization. This wasn't just about getting Karen to move her car anymore. This was about standing up to someone who thought they could control their lives. John, ever the problem solver, decided that he would do whatever it took to put an end to this once and for all. But it wasn't going to be about shouting or fighting. This would require something more clever, something that could win not just the battle, but the war. Loophole. Determined to find a solution, John spent the next few nights poring over legal documents, HOA regulations, and property rights. He wasn't about to let Karen or the HOA bully him anymore. After hours of research, John discovered something that gave him hope. A clause in the local zoning laws that allowed homeowners to make certain security modifications to their property, as long as they weren't permanent structures. The clause was vague enough to be interpreted in many ways, but also meant that John could legally build a barrier around his driveway. There was no law that prevented it, and no HOA rule that could touch it as long as it was a temporary security feature. This discovery was a turning point. For many people, facing a problem like this could feel insurmountable. But John's story is a reminder that, even in the face of overwhelming bureaucracy and power, knowledge and preparation can be your greatest allies. With the legal loophole in hand, John and Lisa took action. They hired a contractor, rented an excavator, and began the process of digging a trench around their driveway. It wasn't just a small ditch. It was a full-on moat, deep and wide enough to ensure that no car, especially Karen's SUV, could cross it. As the contractor worked, John felt a sense of satisfaction that he hadn't experienced in weeks. This wasn't just about blocking Karen's car anymore. This was about sending a message that their home was their sanctuary, and no one's going to take that away from them. The trench wasn't a permanent structure, so it was completely within the law. But the message it sent was loud and clear. This was their property, and they would fight for it. This moment of bold action was cathartic, not just for John, but for Lisa as well. They had been pushed to their limits. But now, they were fighting back on their own terms, and the feeling of empowerment was like nothing they had ever experienced before. The next morning, as the sun rose and the couple surveyed their work, they couldn't help but smile at the sight of their new trench. But that smile quickly faded when Karen came storming over. Her face was bright red with anger, and her eyes were practically shooting fire as she approached the driveway. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice trembling with rage. John stood his ground, a calm smile on his face as he looked at her. "Just a security feature, Karen. Something to protect my property. Completely legal, too." Karen, unable to comprehend what had just happened, tried to argue, but John had done his homework, and every argument she threw at him bounced off like water on a stone. "You can't do this," Karen yelled, her face turning an even deeper shade of red. "Watch me," John replied, calmly sipping his coffee. The power dynamic had shifted. For the first time, Karen was in control, and it felt good. This was the moment that changed everything. Instead of getting angry or reacting emotionally, John had taken a methodical, calm approach. It's a lesson for all of us. When faced with adversity, taking a step back and thinking strategically can lead to the best results. After Karen's tirade in the driveway, John realized that the battle was far from over. While Karen attempted to intimidate him with threats of legal action, John remained calm and focused. He knew that if he was going to outsmart her, he needed more than just a trench and a drawbridge. He needed knowledge, and he needed to ensure that every step he took was legally sound. He spent several sleepless nights diving into local zoning laws, HOA regulations, and even calling a lawyer friend for advice. This wasn't just about winning a small skirmish. This was about standing up for their rights, and John knew that knowledge was the weapon that could tip the scales in their favor. What he found was a legal loophole that would change everything. Security modifications to private property were allowed as long as they weren't permanent structures. This discovery was a game changer. It wasn't the loudest voice or the biggest confrontation that would win, but the quiet, methodical approach of being prepared and knowing the law. For the first time, John and Lisa felt a surge of hope. They weren't powerless anymore. They had done their homework, and now they had the power to act. This lesson is crucial. No matter the situation, taking the time to understand the rules and learning the ins and outs can be the difference between feeling defeated and finding a way forward. As the trench in Drawbridge slowly took shape, something unexpected began to happen. While Karen had spent her days lording over the neighborhood, making petty complaints and enforcing her will, the couple's bold move began to stir something else: solidarity. It started with a few quiet conversations with neighbors who had also felt the sting of Karen's tyranny. These were people who had been living in fear of her for years, afraid to speak up for fear of retaliation. But as John and Lisa's trench became more and more of a symbol of resistance, others began to take notice. Neighbors, once too intimidated to act, began to share their own stories of Karen's overreach. Stories of unjust fines, unreasonable demands, and the constant fear of living under the thumb of a tyrannical HOA president. Slowly, the couple's actions inspired others to speak out. It wasn't just about the trench anymore. It was about showing Karen that the community wasn't going to sit by and let her continue her reign. John and Lisa didn't just win over a handful of neighbors. They sparked a movement that empowered others to stand up for themselves as well. This is a vital lesson for all of us. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is take the first step. You never know who might be waiting for someone to show them that it's possible to fight back. With the community's growing support, the situation began to shift. Neighbors who once kept their heads down now started questioning Karen's actions. One by one, they began to challenge her and her authority, not through confrontations, but by quietly documenting her overreach. It wasn't long before the HOA board itself began to feel the pressure. Some board members who had been silent in the face of Karen's abuses now started asking questions, unsure if the tactics Karen was using were in line with the community's best interests. John and Lisa had become more than just victims. They had become leaders. What started as a personal battle had grown into a community-wide revolt. The drawbridge wasn't just a structure. It was a symbol of standing up for what was right. John and Lisa's calm yet firm stance against the unfair treatment had inspired others to take action, not in anger, but with quiet strength and resolve. This collective action is a powerful reminder that we're often stronger when we work together. The next time you face an obstacle, look around. You might find that there are others who share your frustration, and by coming together, you can make real change happen. As the situation escalated, John and Lisa realized that the battle wasn't just about their driveway anymore. They had stumbled upon a deeper issue. Karen wasn't just misusing her power over them. She was misusing it over the entire community. The couple decided to take action and bring everything into the light. With the support of their neighbors, they began gathering evidence of Karen's abuses. Records of fines she had issued without cause, misused funds, and even instances where she had overstepped her bounds as HOA president. Armed with this new information, John and Lisa knew they had to present it at the next HOA meeting. When the day finally arrived, they walked into the meeting room not just as homeowners, but as advocates for fairness and justice. They shared the evidence with the board, exposing Karen's corruption for all to see. The other homeowners, who had been too afraid to speak out, now saw the truth. The community, which had been fractured and silent for so long, was united in their disgust at Karen's behavior. The power had shifted. What began as a small personal dispute had now become a full-blown community movement. The lesson here is simple but powerful. The truth has a way of coming out, and when it does, it has the power to unite people against injustice. Never underestimate the power of transparency and speaking out for what is right. As the evidence mounted against Karen, the inevitable began to happen. The other members of the HOA board, once too afraid to challenge Karen, began to turn on her. It wasn't just John and Lisa who were fed up. It was the entire community. In a dramatic turn of events, Karen was voted out as HOA president. The power she had clung to so tightly for years was stripped away in an instant. But Karen didn't go down quietly. She lashed out, accusing John and Lisa of harassment and claiming they were trying to ruin her reputation. However, her cries fell on deaf ears. The damage was done. The HOA, once a powerful entity in the neighborhood, began to crumble. The community no longer feared Karen. They had seen her for who she truly was. In the end, Karen's fall from grace wasn't just about losing her position as HOA president. It was about losing the respect and trust of the community. The story of her downfall is a testament to the fact that even the most powerful can be toppled when their actions are exposed, and when people come together to stand up for what's right. With Karen gone, the neighborhood began to heal. The HOA board, now free of her influence, was dissolved. No longer would residents be subjected to petty rules and invasive fines. John and Lisa, once victims of Karen's overreach, had become local heroes. Their fight for justice had not only freed them from the tyranny of the HOA, but had also set the entire neighborhood on a new path. For the first time in years, people felt free. There were no more concerns about whether the color of their door would earn them a fine, or if their grass was too high. People began to interact with one another again, not out of fear, but out of mutual respect. And as for John and Lisa, their driveway, now complete with symbolic trench and drawbridge, became a symbol of their triumph. It was a reminder that standing up for your rights, no matter how big or small, could lead to real, lasting change. This part of the story is a powerful reminder that it's never too late to take action. Even when things seem impossible, standing up for your principles can change your life and the lives of those around you for the better. As the dust settled and the neighborhood returned to a state of peace, John and Lisa found themselves reflecting on the journey that had led them here. It had started as a simple issue with a blocked driveway, but it had turned into something far more profound, a lesson in courage, justice, and the power of standing up for what's right. They had learned that sometimes the quietest voices are the most powerful. They had fought not with aggression or force, but with knowledge, patience, and a deep belief in what was just. In the end, their victory wasn't just about the trench or the drawbridge. It was about reclaiming their right to live peacefully in their own home. For the audience, this is an important takeaway. No matter the challenges, no matter how small the issue may seem, standing up for yourself is always worth it. And often it's the quiet, determined resolve that makes the biggest difference. John and Lisa had won, not just for themselves, but for the entire neighborhood. And they had done so with grace, intelligence, and integrity. The power of standing up for what is right never fades. And it can change not only your life, but also the world around you.